Department plans to take on affirmative action in college admissions. According to a document obtained by The Times, the plan is to try to protect white applicants from discrimination. Joining us to discuss is Matt Schlapp. He's the former political director for George W. Bush and current chairman for the American Conservative Union. And Van Jones, he's a CNN political commentator, former special advisor to President Obama. Gentlemen, great to have both of you. Matt Schlapp, what is wrong with affirmative action?
Nothing's wrong with it. I think it was well intended. The idea is that when you have populations that have faced serious discrimination, the government steps in to make sure that people are not doing things that break the law, that discriminate against people. But
so why now try to change it?
Well, the whole concept is eventually you want these programs to go away. Eventually we want to realize Dr. King's dream of a colorblind society.
And have we gotten there? Is it time? Do you think that it has outlived now its usefulness?
Well, at the American Conservative Union, we have this project called the Family Prosperity Index. And what you're seeing in politics and what you're seeing in culture is there's actually tremendous hardship that is really wreaking havoc on rural white America. Opioid addiction, suicides are going through the roof. So at some point in all of these programs, especially in these college admissions, Allison, you're saying to one person, we're going to give you a leg up, we're going to give you the slot, but inevitably, in every case, you're actually taking slots away as well. And as a country, we have to ask ourselves, at what point do we have the right standards in these programs?
Van, your response.
Well, I think that we're seeing now a pretty disturbing pattern with Jeff Sessions and with the Department of Justice. We really should be trying to, especially for, we'll get to the white community, which needs a lot of help as well, especially rural. We agree on that. But you've got some communities that you really need to be trying to open doors of opportunity and close prison doors. Sessions seems to be going in the opposite direction. He seems to be wanting to double down on the failed drug war, which is going to have more young urban youth going to prison, and then ratchet back on the scholarships and the support to get them to college. You put that together, and you've got a Justice Department that seems to have a very negative and disturbing view of the future for young African Americans, for young Latinos and others. The other thing is, when you have a total approach, you also want more people voting, and you want better policing. He seems to be wanting to take a step back on the policing standards and yet not be helping on the voting standards. So you have a whole, it's a pattern here that's very, very
I understand.
negative.
And so you're looking at the big picture and the pattern. But on affirmative action specifically, what about Matt's point, the conservative viewpoint, that poor whites are struggling also, and if in college admissions you always favor black or Latino applicants, that it's now no longer the goal of a level playing field isn't working exactly?
Well, the numbers don't bear out the concern yet. You have to admit, at some point, you could get to a point where you're overcompensating. But if you look at the numbers, they don't bear that out. But let's not conflate apples and oranges here. Matt is 100% correct. When you're talking about rural poverty, what's going on in small-town America, we have not done enough. Democrats or Republicans have not done enough to respond to those crises. But I think it's a mistake. Rather than turning on each other, we should turn to each other. We need to be doing a lot better by all kids, especially low-income kids. But poverty is not the same as racial discrimination. You got to be able to deal with both.
Can I do something very dangerous? Can I also agree with Van? That I also think that our prison system and our incarceration system should be focused on violent criminals. I do fear that we have this lock-em-up mentality. We put people in prison who we don't like instead of who we fear. And I want to focus on violent criminals. So I do think Van has a good point there. I think that when it comes to all these questions, we have to have a fair understanding that when you hurt one American to help another American, and you do it for all these reasons in employment or specifically at colleges, we have to see what the implications are for the person who was left behind. And I just think in 21st century America, with all of our problems, and our problems are on our television sets all day long, but at some point we have to say, don't we all have a fair shake? Haven't we done a good job for half a century to try to change our laws to make sure that we are colorblind and that everybody has...
It just depends on if you think that we're done with that work. If you think it's now a level playing field.
I would say no. I don't think it's a level playing. I don't think we ever get to perfection or nirvana on in this world.
So then,
but I think it gets better.
Students still need some help.
I think it gets better. I think your standards need to lower. So I think what you have to do with the judicial standards to determine...
I disagree with a couple things here, though.
Well, let me just say, I'll quickly summarize. there are legal standards on whether or not you can have these programs and when these programs
Yep.
have done what they needed to do. And I actually think the scrutiny standards need to be raised so that you only have these programs when you can see real racial. You're not having
When you
racial
have a problem.
discrimination at Harvard, at Yale, at Princeton, at Berkeley. It's absurd.
Okay, Van.
Well, on this point, I see it differently. First of all, the Supreme Court has already ratcheted the standards up pretty high. They just revisited this issue a little while ago, and basically what you've got to be able to show is a whole number of things. You've got to be able to show that there's a pattern of discrimination, not just at that institution, but that's important. Mm-hmm. It also turns out that our Supreme Court says that colleges do have an interest in making sure that the student body is diverse. It can't be overdone, but that is a problem. If you could come up with a situation where if you have the wrong set of standards, the entire student body could look exactly one way.
Yeah, but hold on one second. But bottom line, Van, are you comfortable that the Justice Department is going to look into whether it's time to rework affirmative action?
No, because we just went through this with the Supreme Court, and if the Justice Department wants to lean forward and try to deal with racial discrimination, you still have states in this country that are blocking people from voting aggressively, according to the Supreme Court. You still have police departments that are discriminating. You still have real serious barriers. They're backing away from that, and they're focusing on this. I think it's a complete misallocation of resources.
Okay. I have to leave it there.
Sorry.
You got the first word. Thanks, man.
I'll come back and get the last word.
Please do. Thank you very much.